It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son James was playing in the backyard of our suburban home. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself, mostly. He never had many friends, but he always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog, Fido, when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was he could be talking to. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single mom is hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went outside in the backyard, I was a bit confused because James was the only person back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I heard another voice. "James, it's time to come inside," I called out to him. He came inside and sat down on the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. "James, who were you talking to out there?" I asked. James looked up for a moment. "I was playing with my new friend," he said, smiling. I poured him some milk and continued to pry. As any good mother would. "Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you ask him to have lunch with us?" I asked James. James stared at me for a moment before replying. "His name is Laughing Jack." I was a bit taken back what he said. "Oh, that's a strange name. What does your friend look like?" I asked, a bit confused. "He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly nose cone. He's got long arms with baggy pants and strippy socks, and he always smiles." I realized my son was about an imaginary friend. I suppose it's normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. It's probably just a phase. The rest of the day as pure as usual. It was starting to get late, so I put James to bed, tucked him in, and gave him a kiss. And I made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark and I was some kind of rundown amusement park. I was scared. I was running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prized stuffed animals hung from nooses in the game huts, all with a sick grin stitched on their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there was not another living thing on sight. Then suddenly, I began to hear the music play, the sounds of Pop Goes the Weasel. It began to play on a squeeze box. It echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tunes to the circus tent, almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spot shining on the center as the big top. As I walked toward the light, the music slowed down and I found myself singing along, unable to stop. All around the berry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought it was all in fun. The music stopped before its climax. Suddenly the lights shone. The intensity of the lights was practically blinding all. All I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another appeared, and another, and another. There were dozens of them, all coming toward me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch the haunting figures drew nearer. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each and one of them, I noticed they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some of them had cuts all over their bodies, and others were severely burnt, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing inside me. The children tore them apart and I faded away. All I can hear was laughter. Horrible, evil, awful laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few death breaths, I looked over and saw a few of James' action figures were positioned facing on top of my nightstand. I sighed. James had probably woke up early and put these there. I gathered up the toys and made my way to James' room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed it back into his toy box. and headed out to the living room. A little while later, James woke up, and I made him breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about the toys. "James, honey, did you put the toys in Mommy's room this morning?" He shut up his eyes and at me for a moment, then quickly glanced back down at his cereal. "Laughing Jack did it." I rolled my eyes and responded, "Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep your toys in your room." James nodded and finished up his breakfast, then decided to go out and play in the yard. I went to relax in the living room for him, and I must have dozed off before I woke up a couple hours later. Shit! I need to go check on James. I was a bit worried. It had been over 2 hours and I haven't checked on him. I went to step out onto the backyard, but James wasn't there. I was getting nervous, so I called out, "James! James, where are you?" Then I heard a giggle come out from the front yard. I rushed to the gate, around to the front house. James was sitting on the sidewalk, and I breathed in a sigh of relief. I walked over to him. "James, how many times do I have just told you to stay in the backyard?" "James, what are you eating?" James looked up at me and reached to his pocket and pulled out full hard candies in all colors. This made me nervous. "James, who gave you that candy?" James just stared at me, not speaking. "James, please tell Mommy where you got that candy." James hung his head down and said, "Laughing Jack gave it to me." My heart sunk. I kneeled down and looked him at the eyes. "James, I had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He's not real. Now this is a very serious situation. I need to know who gave you that candy." I could see my son's eyes tear up. "But Mama, Laughing Jack did give me the candy." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James has never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I made him spit out the candy and throw the rest away. James appears to be fine. Maybe I'm overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom and Linda next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a closer eye on James. That night, I have to put James to bed as usual, and I decided to go to bed early myself. Suddenly, I was awoken from a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed, and I hurried downstairs, and when I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counter has been thrown to the floor, and our dog, Fido, hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy. The same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James' room, but followed by loud crashes, and I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with the speed that an only mother whose child is dangerous could have. I burst through the door and flicked the light on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed, crying and shaking with fear, a pool of urine staining the sheets. I scooped up my child and ran out the house, and I went next door to Tim and Linda's house. Luckily, they were still awake. They let me use their phone, and I called the police. It didn't take them long to arrive, and I explained them what happened. They looked at me as if I was crazy. They searched the house, but all they found was a dead dog and 2 trashed rooms. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten to the house and done this right before I'm making a quick escape. When they heard me coming up the stairs, I knew it wasn't true. All the doors were locked and none of the windows were open. Whatever was in my house didn't come from outside. The next day, James stayed inside, and I didn't want him to leave my sight. I went to the garage and found his old baby monitor and set it up his room. If anything comes into his room tonight, I was able to hear it. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife drawer, and I put it in the nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting you hurt my little boy. Soon enough, night came. I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised him that I wasn't going to let anything happen to him. I tucked him in and gave him a kiss, and I turned on the nightlight. Before closing the door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could, but a few hours later I felt myself drifting off. Maybe it would be safe for the night, and I needed to sleep. Just as I lay my head on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor. I had put it on my nightstand, and first it sounded like interference, like the kind of radio would make. Then it turned into a soft moan. Was James asleep? Then I heard a laugh, the laugh from my nightmare, that horrible laugh. I sprung from bed and grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James' room and creaked the door open. When I tried to turn on the switch, but it wouldn't come on. I took a step, and as I could feel the warm, thick liquid on my body, suddenly James' nightlight came on, and all I could see is horror laid out in front of me. James' body was nailed up to the wall. The nails pierced through his hands and feet. His chest was cut open wide, and his organ has been hung down to the floor. His eyes and tongue has been removed with almost of his teeth. I was disgusted. I could hardly believe this was my baby boy. Then I heard it again, the soft, desperate moan. James was still alive. My baby, my poor baby, in so much pain, barely clinging to life. I ran across the room and vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by the horrible crackle coming from behind me. I spun around while still wiping bile from my mouth. Then out of shadows, the fiend responsible for all this horror, Laughing Jack. His ghost white skin and matted black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes, surrounded by dark black rings. His twisted smile revealed a row of sharp, jagged teeth. His skin didn't look like skin at all. It mostly looked like rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with stripped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque. His long arms hanging down and past his waist, and the way he was posed made him look almost boneless, like a rag doll. He let out a sickening laugh, as if to let me know that he was pleased with my reaction to his work. He turned around slowly in front of James and began to laugh even more at the horrific sight as he lay down. That wasn't enough to shake me from the toilet. I stabbed, "Get away from him, you bastard!" I rushed at the monster, raising the knife above my head, and stabbed down at him. But as the knife touched him, he disappeared in a cloud of black smoke. The knife passed right through and pierced James' still beating heart, splashing the warm blood on my face. No. What have I done? My baby. I killed my baby. I immediately fell on my knees, and I could hear the sirens, the distance growing louder. My baby boy, my sweet baby boy. I promised Mommy would protect you, but I failed. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. Police soon arrived to find me in front of my son, still wielding the knife in my baby's blood. The trial was in short insanity. I was placed in Fripolis house for the criminally insane, where I've been for the past 2 months. It's not so bad here. The only reason I'm awake now is because someone is playing Pop Goes the Weasel outside my window. I'll talk orderless about it in the morning.